Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. Today, we're diving into civic action, curiosity, and what it means to create tools that truly serve the public. My guest is Sucharita Kodali, a nationally recognized expert in retail and consumer behavior and a vice president and principal analyst at Forrester Research. She's known for her sharp insights and deep expertise in how people make decisions, skills she's now applying in a different arena. Sucharita launched the Election Hub, a nonpartisan, easy-to-use online resource that gives North Carolina voters a clear, accessible way to understand who's on their ballot, especially in local races where information can be hard to find. Sucharita, welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Michele. I'm excited for this conversation.
Let's start with your journey into this space. You've spent years analyzing how people make decisions as consumers, what they buy, how they shop, and what influences their behavior. How did that lens shape or spark your interest in how people engage with elections and local civic life?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I started the Election Hub because I was a voter and I struggled in my local elections with figuring out who to vote for. We would just, like so many of us, when you go to vote, you have your ballot. And for the hyper local races, where it's everything from state legislators to county commissioners to a city council to judges, nobody's heard of most of these people. And yet we have to vote for them, and they have actually a fair amount of discretion to decide how everything from ordinances to our tax dollars are spent. So I found that there was this gap where if I'm being asked to make these decisions and I have no idea what I should be voting for, what I'm even voting for, clearly this is a problem that other people are facing too. And what I also realized is that I could do what was needed to bridge that gap between the lack of information and bringing that information to other people, because I started doing it for myself. I just started to literally one by one go down a list of 100 candidates and started Googling people and then digging deeper and deeper into different websites and, publicly available resources to discover more and more about the individuals on these ballots. It was a process actually that was not unlike how I research companies, where it is a combination of just internet research and doing some qualitative digging that could be interviews with other people in the space. And the process just seemed very similar, where it's taking advantage of what is already available and putting it into a digestible format for other people. I mean, it's really as simple as that. Like a lot of this information probably collectively sits across hundreds of different websites and links. And it's a service to people to just put it all together into one place. And just that the nature of doing that was useful because it didn't exist before. And Michele, that's something that I think is unique to this particular project, because often people in different large cities will kind of look at me funny when they hear that I'm doing this, because they'll be like, how is this new? Doesn't this already exist? Like, in LA, you have the LAist, and, in San Francisco, you have, kind of the government sending out this stuff. This doesn't exist in Charlotte, in Mecklenburg County, where I live. Like, there are no resources. And oh, by the way, it used to be the local newspaper, the Charlotte Observer, that did this, but they've been essentially their shell of their former selves, because after they were purchased by a hedge fund, the newsroom has about 10% of the staff that it did at its peak. So they don't even cover elections anymore. So this resource does not exist, not only in my town, but probably in a lot of communities through the United States. So that's the difference here.
And what leadership lessons or skills really helped you as you began building something so different from your day job?
So a lot of what I do in my day job is as an individual contributor. I'll have a project, and you go and you can put together some presentation for a client, and that's that. For this, it was really about collaboration, and my collaboration partner in this was the Charlotte Ledger, which is a digital newsroom, a former Charlotte Observer journalist, actually. A lot of after the Charlotte Observer has basically shrunk in size, a lot of those journalists have gone on to other endeavors, and some of them have started things like Substack newsletters, which is essentially how the Charlotte Ledger started. And it had deep ties to the Charlotte community. It was well respected in the Charlotte community, and I think that was something that has helped the election hub in giving it credibility, because a lot of people in Charlotte didn't know me, and my very first versions of the election hub were basically posts on Reddit. It's grassroots, but that's not a formula for credibility. So I think that a large part of what I discovered was important and has been essential is just partnerships, and partnerships with credible organizations. And in addition to just the credibility, it was also a journalistic lens layered on top of this. I had the help and support of professional journalists to ensure that the tone of what was written was nonpartisan, and where possible it would incorporate insights that these journalists may have known from their own experiences, covering a lot of the candidates in previous stories. So there was a lot of value in recognizing that this is an effort that's more than just an individual contributor. It has to be a group of people who each bring very specific, valuable skills to the table.
And how did you motivate these journalists and the Charlotte Ledger to collaborate with you? What was in it for them?
Well, the founder of the Charlotte Ledger is a man named Tony Messia. And one of the things that even before I approached the Ledger was I knew that they were interested in election information, and they were interested in providing just election insights. I actually met them and met the team at essentially a candidate meet and greet for a local election years ago. And just the fact that they were organizing a candidate meet and greet led me to believe that they were an advocate of election information. And at the same time, I know how laborious this whole process is, and I know that journalists don't always have the time and the resources to do this. That's why nobody in Charlotte's done it really to date. So I just kind of approach them with that, like, look, I know that you're interested in this. I'm already doing this. Why don't you just think about distributing this content? My initial, I would say, mentors or people that I had initially had conversations about what can I do with these Reddit posts that I started with. Some of my early mentors, they would tell me, just go to your local NPR station, or go to go to the Charlotte Observer. And the issue with those is that they were still very bureaucratic, and I was not a known entity to them, so that was not likely to be a viable path. But I had some friends of friends who knew Tony, and made an introduction, and that helped. And then we tested it out with a very small municipal election where very few people vote, so there wasn't going to be much of a downside if things went sideways. But to even contrary to that, things went really well because people used it, and it was the only resource like it, because nobody's covering these municipal elections, and it ended up being a really great template to continue doing it. Now they're able to get access and provide this content that just didn't exist in the community for a long time.
Now, you also had the help of C20. Can you tell us more about C20 and the role that they had in supporting the election hub?
Yeah, so C20 is is essentially it's a fast pitch competition / program that is run by a nonprofit in Charlotte, a venture philanthropy nonprofit called Social Venture Partners. And there are, I believe, a number of social venture partners throughout the United States, but kind of Social Venture Partners in Charlotte is the one that has this particular Seed 20 contest. And it's essentially the way that I describe it. It's like a Y Combinator pitch contest, but very specifically for nonprofits. So it is a way to get exposure to the Charlotte community. It's a way to meet other nonprofits. And ultimately, the pitch is done with the hope that you can win a $20,000 prize to essentially kick off a project or to launch your nonprofit. So I was selected, the Election Hub was selected as one of 10 nonprofits for the class of 2025. We didn't win the $20,000 prize, but it was a fantastic way to just learn about how to launch a nonprofit, because the Charlotte Ledger itself is a for-profit organization, but the Election Hub we have essentially spun off as its own nonprofit now. So it is now separated from the Ledger, and it's its own entity. It's its own organization. It empowers us to have different approaches to fundraising, and it has a different mission. The mission is about voter empowerment and education, and it even allows us to do things even beyond just merely a voter guide. Like, for instance, if we wanted to have a journalist who is very, very specifically focused on local government, we may be able to raise funds to do that, or have a podcast series, which is one of the things that we're working on to help educate voters about issues that are very pertinent to this hyperlocal region. It empowers us to do that too.
And when you reflect on the early days of this project, what surprised you the most, either about the process or the impact?
One of the things that I have learned in my business life is that often you're very lucky if you can get early indicators of in particular of success. If you open a restaurant, there's like a line around the building that first day, like that's a really good thing. And one of the things that I didn't know when I did my very, very first draft of an election write-up, how it would be received. I was a little nervous because I'd never done a write-up like this. It was writing essentially a summary of humans and people who are running for office. I was a little concerned about getting the information wrong, kind of not characterizing things appropriately, potentially being flamed by someone or another for misrepresenting something. So I did it, kind of with the full awareness that, kind of if I got really critiqued, I'd just have to quickly pull down the post. And what happened was actually to the contrary, where I quickly got a lot of upvotes and a lot of positive feedback. I had candidates actually writing comments saying thank you and inviting voters to engage with them. And really the aha moment for me that, I was onto something and that I was filling a void in the community was that my very first post had like 20,000 views on Reddit, and the entire election had like 70,000 voters. So I was like, there's to have that kind of a ratio is pretty good. So that is what really led me to recognize that there was something here, and that there was something that was an opportunity to fill a void. Yeah, I mean that's really what the aha I think early on was just that validation. I mean, it kind of spoke for itself, and we continue to see a lot of users use it, and that was one of the things about even Seed 20 is just continuing to spread the word to more and more people in the community. One of the really fortuitous things about the Seed 20 application process was that the application and the evaluation was due in October of 2024, which was smack in the middle of a presidential election. And when people themselves were researching candidates and they saw that there was no easy way to research these candidates. And here's this application that comes in that has a link to all the candidates. And I think they saw it and they were like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it happens to kind of be the right thing at the right moment in time. And that I think was also one of the fortuitous things that kind of helped with Seed 20 and hopefully will continue to be something that spreads the word in the community. Because I think if it had happened in almost any other year, not during an election, it wouldn't have resonated in quite the same way.
Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back shortly with Sucharita Kodali of the Election Hub. Stay with us. We'd love for you to be a part of the Expressions of Leadership community. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm here with Sucharita Kodali talking about civic leadership and her work on the Election Hub. Let's dive deeper into how this project came to life. What were your early priorities in shaping the Election Hub? What needed to be in place for it to actually work for voters?
A lot of it was just the information itself in an accessible format. And I used a lot of available free tools online. It would be everything from social media to Google like Docs and Google Sheets, literally sharing links that anybody could access. And what really was the necessary thing was, in addition to having kind of professional editing and a journalistic voice, which the Charlotte Ledger and the team there was able to provide, it was just hosting it on a website. Kind of, so that was really the guts of what it was. I mean, it wasn't super complicated. We're still at a phase now where our user experience does need a little bit of help because for the most part, it's just a laundry list of links, and it ends up being, very, very long pages that have a lot of scroll. And what we really need to do is to layer on a better way for a user to find their particular ballot, not every candidate that is there, unless they want to see every candidate that's there. And, kind of perhaps just a better way to navigate the experience. Otherwise, it can be quite cumbersome. And unless you know how to, kind of search on like a mobile website page, it can be difficult. But it was definitely the website that was the big part of it. And like I said, we're still in the process of trying to figure out what's the right user experience that's going to resonate the most. There are a number of like election plugins that are out there that the Knight Foundation and other organizations have offered to election portals, but there's nothing that's really worked for us. One of the things that I found that is a shortcoming is that a lot of these plugins only work for certain platforms. Like they'll only work for WordPress or they'll only work for Squarespace. And, if you don't have WordPress or Squarespace, you can't even use them. Or in some cases, there'll be some plugin and it just requires a significant amount of code, and it may not be the format that you pulled together content in the first place to begin with. So there's some of those challenges. The other aspect that we are finding is valuable here is social media. And the opportunity to use social media to both educate voters about elections in general and some of the challenges with participation in elections, but also informing people about some of the specific issues that may be on the ballot as well. I don't have a lot of social media experience myself, but one of the things that I've learned, and as part of the team that we've built at the Election Hub, is a lot of interns, and that we work with high school students, actually sometimes college students, who are really believers in the mission and the importance of civic engagement. But it's their superpower is like they're savvy with social media, and we've been able to leverage it to our advantage. Is take all of what they know and they enjoy about social media, and let's channel it to help the community, and that's been great, because not only does it help to educate in the way that we're hoping to educate, but it also in some ways helps to train these young people potentially as future journalists as well, and future civic activists, I would say.
And in addition to the collaboration that you spoke of earlier, what leadership practices did you lean on in your work with interns?
The intern program that we have it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of establishing very regimented training to make sure that everyone knows exactly what they need to do and what is expected of them. Regular check-ins and communication, transparency. I think that that's been a huge part of making things, kind of making this work, because I think that when I've described it to people in the past, like, oh, we have high school interns, there's often a skepticism of like, how the heck do you make it work with students who are that inexperienced and early in their professional lives? And a lot of it does come down to training them well, interviewing very rigorously, and making sure that we even have the right candidates who have the level of executive functioning skills that are required for something like this, because there's a lot of, in addition to some of these technical skills like social media knowledge and, kind of exposure to everything from Excel to Google Sheets, and being able to work well with those, it's also being very detail oriented and being very, very deadline oriented, because one of the things that is unique to this particular project, but it's also one of our strengths, is that we have very tight deadlines, and we have to do everything within a 6-week time frame, which is great for like an internship, because it's like it time stamps it as like it's only going to be 6 weeks long. But yeah, I mean, it's like within that 6 weeks, like there have to be certain deadlines that are met, because if you don't meet those deadlines, then we're not going to get the information done in time for voters. So I think all of those things have helped to create structure, and have helped us get a lot out of it with people who are very early in their careers. And I think it's great for them as well, because there are not a lot of internships for high school students that are out there, and very, very few that have this level of impact, right? I mean, you're doing this to help people in the community. And, some of our high school students that we've had work with us have gone on to, some of the top universities in the country and world, and have won merit scholarships, kind of, I wouldn't say as a result of it, but this has helped their own applications and their own resumes as well.
Well, we'll be right back. After the break, we'll talk about the impact of this project and how it's shaping the way people engage with leadership at the local level. By partnering with Expressions of Leadership, you'll reach an audience of professionals passionate about leadership and growth. For sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm here with Sucharita Kodali, and we're talking about the Election Hub and its work to provide accessible information to local voters. Now, before the break, you mentioned the difficulties of engaging voters. What's a key discovery that you've made about engagement?
I knew this from previous business experiences, but marketing is hard. I was lucky with the Election Hub because there were early indicators that there was a need for this. But who we resonated with were already the people who are most likely to vote. But when you look at, well, who votes, it's still a small percent of the overall population, particularly when you get to municipal races or you get to off year, like midterm races. And to expand the insight and expand the value to a larger group of people just requires marketing, and it requires, some of it can be through social media, but there are no shortcuts really, is what I've discovered. Especially for something like this, where kind of, I think that a lot of people see voting in elections as a chore, and they don't, I mean, it's not, it does require some work, and it does require some thought. And, I think we're doing what we can to make it easier for people. But even just getting the word out and making people aware that the resource exists, and encouraging more people to use it, especially people who may not be regular voters, that's been a challenge. So we're always open to interesting new marketing ideas. We have very limited budgets, so we can't just, pay for a lot of the marketing. So we have to be clever and creative about PR. We have to be thinking about what are guerrilla marketing tactics, or what are other very inexpensive ways to spread the word. And there's a lot of creativity that we can think about there, but it's not easy. It's not easy to reach the million people who live in this county.
So, marketing is certainly a challenge. What are some of the other challenges that you're navigating as a leader in this work?
I think prioritization is always an issue. Time management is an issue. This is something that I am doing in my free time. I still have a full-time job, and recognizing how much time that you can dedicate. And given that it's a finite amount of time, what are the most important things to do? Like, for instance, in 2025, in this election, we had to make a call that, we're not going to cover as many counties in this election as we did in the presidential, for the mere reason that it's a municipal election. There's going to be super low voter participation in spite of our best efforts, and we have limited time and resources. Let's focus on where we're going to get the most users. And, that's not to say that in the future we won't make the same, kind of in the future, we probably will make a different decision, and hopefully we'll have resources to do that. But when you're so constrained, you're constrained by budget, you're constrained by time, you have to make trade-offs. And some of those trade-offs are not ideal, but you have to make them because you don't have a choice otherwise. So certainly, kind of higher level decisions around what to cut and what to keep are, kind of have certainly been critical. As a nonprofit now, we're also thinking a lot about how do we keep this organization as a sustainable organization into the future. And I know you have experience with nonprofits too, and kind of it has to be more than just one or two people volunteering their time. Yes, I can continue to volunteer my time for the foreseeable future, and that will keep it alive, but it's not going to help it grow, and it's not going to help with the mission of educating more voters. So that is going to require, we go back to marketing, we go back to, kind of being able to serve more people in surrounding counties, kind of reaching people where they are. All of this is going to require budget, and it's going to require thinking about how do we get access to, whether it's grant money, or how do we get more individual donations. So that's been a large part of thinking through our strategic plan and finding time to think about, well, what can we do to raise money in 2026? Like, what programs can we put in place? What fundraisers? Are there conferences or events that we can do that are paid events that may be able to help us generate revenue that can help to sustain the organization into the future, that can help us pay our interns, that can help us spread the word. And, because I do think that once we get to critical mass, it becomes enough of a valued resource that perhaps, kind of some of the marketing is less essential. But then as we grow, kind of you'll still want to think about other programming efforts and other things to keep the community engaged.
And what kind of impact have you seen so far from voters?
Part of the reason that I continue to do this, even after the first time or the first couple of times, and I was able to have the kind of the encouragement to do so, is in fact that people proactively reached out to me asking for my annual write-up. And kind of so it was pretty clear that not only did people need this, but there were people that were starting to kind of build this into their annual election planning. They were just kind of, they knew that this existed and this is part of their research process. So there's definitely that, and that's part of what we're continuing to do, is to keep building that out and to keep making sure that this message, that this resource is known to everybody in Mecklenburg County and its surrounding areas, because we actually, especially in bigger elections, do cover more than just even Mecklenburg County. We cover a lot of the surrounding counties. And last year in the presidential election, we actually covered a lot of the large cities in North Carolina altogether, not just Charlotte. So this is something that absolutely voters are using, especially the ones who are the most educated, the most likely to vote. They appreciate this and they know it. The challenge is always that it's that delta between the people who vote and the people who should be voting, that kind of, and who are not voting, that we also need to reach and inform as well. So that's a large part of what kind of the next, I think, the next couple of years is going to be, is just continuing to, in addition to creating the content and meeting the needs of all of our existing users, to continue to grow the user base of the Election Hub.
Now, trust is such an essential element of leadership. And I would argue that it's particularly important for a nonpartisan project like Election Hub. What did you learn about building trust, whether with collaborators or with the public, through this work?
One question that I often get asked, and certainly, as an example, it was part of the C20 application process. This is something that people do often ask, is how are you nonpartisan? Or, kind of anytime you kind of you step into something that even as the word political, there's a perception that you may be biased or that you have an agenda. And truly, the only agenda we have is to get more people voting and to be educated and informed when they cast their ballot. That's really it. Who people vote for we're agnostic to. We cover every candidate that is on the ballot, including the independent third-party candidates. And we approach every candidate as equally as we can, researching all of the same, kind of reaching out to them in the same way, looking at all of the same data points in the same way. We have a spreadsheet that we fill out, and we try to fill out every cell for every candidate. And I work very, very closely with journalists who have been trained in how to present things neutrally, to make sure that the information is as unbiased as it can be. And sometimes that means, removing sentences that could be perceived as biased. But at the same time, some of the key things that we're looking for in research for voters, and some of the things that voters want, are pieces of information about, does this candidate have a criminal record? Does this candidate, have they made inflammatory statements on either side of the political spectrum that could be alienating to potential voters? And if other journalists, if other trusted resources have written about those situations, whether it's a candidate's arrest record or whether a candidate has made particularly inflammatory comments, we'll put links to those particular points and let people make their own assessments. But, kind of, I think that that's a huge part of trust is to try to approach things as neutrally as possible and in as nonpartisan of a way as possible, and to provide links so that there's sort of like we're showing the receipts so that, we're not just making statements. It's, kind of we're reporting on this statement that had been or this piece that had been written about this candidate. And you can read it yourself and you can decide if this is something that you want to take into consideration or not. So that's really a huge part of what we're trying to do, and hopefully, kind of we deliver on that, and we try to be as kind of comprehensive as possible, and make sure that voters have the full picture. I mean, a significant part of why I started the Election Hub was always this question of, I heard this is the candidate that I see all the yard signs for, but are some of these other people potentially really good candidates too? And kind of that's really what we're just trying to show is who is everybody, why are they running for office, and are they candidates that you may want to consider?
As someone involved in this work, what kind of leadership do you think we need more of right now, especially when it comes to civic engagement?
I would say that there are different levels. There's how do we get people more informed, and how do you get people even voting? And I think that's one level. And then there's, kind of what we need from the people who are either running for office or actually are in elected office themselves. And I think that now some of the challenges with elected office is a lot of kind of angling for kind of exposure based on sometimes inflammatory comments or extreme positions without necessarily thinking about kind of the nuts and bolts of legislating and improving the lives of as many people as possible who are actually voting for you, or kind of who are within your constituency. So I do think that kind of there are a lot of great legislators that are passionate about that. And as voters, we often don't realize what they do on a day-to-day basis. So there's that level of kind of the leaders that we should continue to respect and kind of give them the space to do what they do well. And then as voters, we need to educate ourselves more. And we need to do more homework and look at the different sources of information that may exist, not just be locked into sometimes social media loops, but kind of go out and seek some primary sources or summaries of primary sources that kind of could be syntheses of actual city council meetings or votes that city council members or county commissioners may have taken on very pertinent issues that affect our lives, whether it's issues related to taxes or schools or public transportation.
And how has this experience with Election Hub changed how you think about leadership in your day-to-day life?
It has definitely helped me, kind of from a time management standpoint, and, kind of really, really focusing on, kind of what's most important, what's most critical, constantly every day thinking through a full to-do list and what needs to be prioritized, and when, kind of when can you slot in what needs to be slotted in at a particular moment in time. Much of it has also been about just even collaboration with the community and, kind of, and collaboration is useful for so many reasons, kind of certainly for improving the product itself. That's a huge part of it. But, kind of also it's crucial for, kind of just even getting buy-in and for getting people to understand what you're doing and understanding what you're doing so that they can potentially become advocates for the end goals. So certainly, kind of a large part of working with the community is being an ambassador, and then hopefully being able to generate other ambassadors too, kind of in the course of the project and informing people about the project as well. So I think that's those have definitely been some great parts of the learning experience, and those are some of the things that I would say have been some of the lessons for me, and hopefully lessons for others too.
We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll explore what's next for the Election Hub and how listeners can get involved. Don't go anywhere. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and we're here with Sucharita Kodali, founder of the Election Hub. Now, we've talked about what led to the Election Hub. Now, let's look ahead. How do you hope this work influences how people show up, not just at the polls, but in their communities?
So the things that I hope that we are able to achieve through this work is certainly higher voter participation. I'd like for Mecklenburg County to not be ranking in the bottom 10. I'd like for us to be one of the top 10 highest voter participation counties in North Carolina. I would hope that we would also, through this, attract more candidates and more choice to voters themselves. A lot of our elected offices have no competition, and that may be part of the reason that perhaps voter participation may not be higher. So the more that you have really viable, thoughtful, hardworking, intelligent candidates, that also may support the electoral process. And that is something that, kind of maybe this effort, I would hope, would shed some light for voters so that they themselves can see what the challenges are, kind of, and if they see that there's an opportunity that they can step into, that they take advantage of that. So that's certainly something that I would look to. Mecklenburg County also gets less money per capita from the federal government, from the state government. In a perfect world, maybe with more voters, we could get a little bit more of our fair share. So there are a lot of different things that I hope for. At the very least, getting more people to vote and having the people who are voting feel more empowered and informed when they vote, that would be a huge win.
What's your vision for where the Election Hub could go in the future?
There are a lot of different places where I envision that it goes. So when we started the nonprofit, the name, the doing business as is the Election Hub from the Charlotte Ledger, but the actual name of the nonprofit is actually even broader. It's the Civic Knowledge Initiative. And so really, when we think about what the future holds, it's truly about anything that could apply to civic knowledge. So the Election Hub, the core product, the very first one is like this website that is there to educate people about candidates on a very hyperlocal ballot. But, kind of we talked about bringing that, kind of maybe in live education sessions to classes or to other nonprofits in a community, or, kind of in September, I will be doing an education session to a retirement community in Charlotte. So certainly it's, kind of taking the information to where voters are. It could be a fundraising effort to potentially fund a journalist that is covering very specifically local government in our region. It is right now, it's also an internship. And I'd like to think about making this a more of a program that can potentially seed another generation of journalists in the future. So there are a lot of different places where it could go. It could be a social media contest where we are rewarding very clever, creative high school students with the best messages for mobilizing voters. A lot of what exists in Charlotte, a lot of the challenges with voting, in particular, low voter participation in dense urban areas, is a problem which is prevalent in other parts of the country too. Like Atlanta has a similar problem, Houston has a similar problem. And these are also very important voter, kind of areas in their respective regions. If we find that we're able to find kind of great success with the election hub in the form of kind of, it leads to higher voter participation over time, it leads to a more informed electorate, it may even lead to more candidates even deciding that they want to run for office. If it does achieve those things, I don't see why this approach couldn't then also be taken and adapted to some of those cities too. So those are some of the places where I see potentially the future going, if things continue to go well with the election hub.
And for people listening who are now very inspired, how can they get involved and support the election hub?
Well, we always love any individual donations that people are willing to make to the Civic Knowledge Initiative and, kind of the election hub as well. But if you believe in this cause, even just spreading the word, if you happen to know anyone in the Charlotte area or people in North Carolina, let them know that this exists and spread the word about it. We're always eager to also take applications for interns, and I love meeting young people who are passionate about civic engagement. So if you know anyone who may be interested, let us know, and we're happy to potentially meet with them and see if there is a way for them to be involved in some of our future election efforts. If anyone has kind of great ideas for better user design or is willing to do some pro bono work for us from a website design standpoint, let us know.
And what's the best way to find the election hub?
So we certainly have the website itself, which is the electionhub.org. We have civicknowledgeinitiative.org as well. So those are certainly ways through our social media. And you can always reach out to me directly as well through any of my social media.
What are the best social media networks to contact you?
The social media network that I'm most active on is LinkedIn. And you can just search for me on LinkedIn. It's just Sucharita Kodali, and either follow me or DM me or connect with me. So that's I'm pretty active there, and that's definitely the easiest way to get in touch.
Well, we always end our show with a segment we call Wisdom and Whimsy, a little leadership insight and a touch of fun. So let's start with the advice question. If you could offer one piece of leadership advice to someone working on a community project or civic initiative, what would it be?
The thing about most communities in the United States is that there is a huge nonprofit ecosystem that is trying to fill in the gaps that government resources and government organizations don't fill. I think that there are close to, I don't know, like 700,000 nonprofits in the United States, and every major city has like at least 1,000 nonprofits, if not, several thousand. And to tap into that community has been essential to the election hub. but I mean, tapping into that to a community has been essential to the Election Hub. And I think that for anybody who has civic thoughts or visions or aspirations, to be able to tap into a, kind of your nonprofit community is huge. There are lists, whether it's through GuideStar or the Foundation Directory. There are organizations like in Charlotte, we have an organization called Share Charlotte. I imagine every city has its sort of nonprofit for nonprofits, and tapping into community organizers who are already reaching out to specific segments can be very powerful. There's no need to completely build from scratch. I think that it's important to kind of partner wherever possible with organizations that have already been boots on the ground, kind of reaching out to different neighborhoods and different groups for years already.
And now for the fun question. What game show do you think you could win and why?
So it would have to be a trivia game show because I love trivia. And I, kind of years ago, Michele, I was actually on, kind of a trivia game show that no longer exists called Win Ben Stein's Money. So I know, totally random, right? I mean, I don't, there must be like some archival video somewhere in some, kind of museum of television history or something. So I would say Jeopardy. That I don't know if I could win it, but I don't know that my reflexes are quite fast enough to completely win it. But at least on TV when I play, I feel like I do.
Well, Sucharita, thank you so much for joining us on Expressions of Leadership and for bringing clarity and conviction to civic action. The Election Hub really stands as a testament to what's possible when leadership meets everyday action and when information becomes empowerment.
Thanks for having me, Michele. Thanks for letting me tell the story.
And to our listeners, if this episode sparked something in you, we hope you'll dig deeper into your community, into the questions that matter, and into the roles that you might play to make civic life more accessible for others. Until next time, keep showing up, stay curious, and lead with purpose right where you are. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.